Today in science, we are going to talk about reproduction, specifically so we can understand asexual reproduction and how organisms can use it as a strategy to pass on their genes. So, if you ask a biologist what the purpose of life is, it's to perpetuate itself. It's in order to ensure that life continues going on, that the species continues. Since organisms can't live forever, although human technology is certainly working on that, we have to reproduce in order to keep the species going. And through reproduction, variations can be inherited. Individuals can pass on traits such as hair color or eye color on to their children. And those variations, we say, have been inherited from one generation to the next. There are two main strategies that organisms use for reproduction, although we can break each down into smaller groups. They are asexual and sexual reproduction. These strategies have different advantages, but they also have some disadvantages that go with them. Asexual reproduction is easy and fast. Asexual reproduction only requires a single individual, and that individual makes a genetic copy of itself. This is great in environments that don't change a lot, environments that are stable. The downside is there's not a lot of variation. So asexual reproduction contributes very little to biodiversity, which means it's susceptible to changing environments and dangerous situations. Most species that are single-celled organisms use some form of asexual reproduction, although not all of them. Usually this is a process called binary fission, where a bacterium splits in two. We also call it mitotic division, which you'll see why in a couple of lectures. Some funguses and plants can also do a similar type of asexual reproduction, where they create spores instead of seeds. And the big difference between a spore and a seed is that a spore is genetically identical to the parent, and a seed is not, because a seed is produced through sexual reproduction. Plants can also use some other asexual strategies. Some of them will grow out special roots or shoots that allow them to grow a new plant. If you've ever seen wild strawberries in the Rockies, sometimes you'll see these shoots that we call runners. They're the little red vines that grow on the ground, and it grows from the stem of one plant and finds a place to put down some new roots, and eventually that plant can break off and become its own individual. This process is often known as budding, and many simple organisms use it too. If you've seen a hydra, the relative of the jellyfish, not the mythological creature, hydras reproduce by budding as well. They'll pop off little copies of themselves, and so do sea anemones and jellyfish too. Humans can also force some species of plants to reproduce asexually by taking a cutting. A cutting is usually a young branch of a tree that is cut in a very specific location with a special type of cut and then planted in the soil. This doesn't work with every species of plants, but we've discovered many of them that do. And these grow because there's a region of the plant called the meristem that is actually able to regenerate roots. So if you cut it in the correct way at the correct place with the right species of plant, you can actually trick the plant into growing brand new roots and create a new individual. And of course, with more complicated organisms, humans also use the technology of cloning. That's what asexual reproduction essentially is. It's the ability to make clones of yourself, and humans have tried to duplicate it for a long time with very mixed results. Cloning is possible, but it's extremely difficult to clone a complex animal, and not all of the processes around it are understood. At the most optimistic, it takes like 1 in every 100 pregnancies to get a viable clone, and the more complex the animal, the higher that number goes up. So even for something very simple, the odds of getting a successful clone are quite low, which, given the time that goes into a pregnancy for mammals at least, makes it quite unfeasible for many of us, and it's completely not impossible for humans right now, but it is certainly both impractical and unethical, given the risks that are currently involved.